Hey, everybody, Joe Joseph here for thedailysheeple.com, and I have the pleasure, the distinct honor, if you will, of having Sean from SGTreport.com joining me today for an interview. And first of all, Sean, thanks for hanging out with me today. And I got to ask you, because I'm one of those guys, and we've been around a long time, and we've constantly heard the whole the sky is falling, especially with regards to the economy. What's going on? I mean, the stock market's at an all-time high. Gold is doing crazy things that, you know, I think it should be a lot higher than it is. What's going on? We live in like this weird world. I don't know. What do you think?
It's the fiat twilight zone, Joe.
I don't like it.
How are you, man? Hey, it's been a long time. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, I am so glad to finally be able to get you in. Our schedules sunk up. Oh, it's awesome. But, you know, I'm always reading your stuff and watching your videos, and I just don't get it. I don't get where we're at.
Yeah, I don't get it anymore either, man. And first of all, let me just say, I like this, that you're doing work for Daily Sheeple, because my friend Mac, I think, is associated with Daily Sheeple. Maybe that's one of his sites. And Mac over at shtfplan.com. And then Melissa from TrueStream Media, I think she does some of that stuff over there for you guys at Daily Sheeple. What a great site.
Yeah, it's really fun. We got a lot of good people over there. And yeah.
You got a lot of people pumping out fake news, huh?
Oh, dude, we're the epitome of fake news. What an attack. Speaking of that, I'm so glad that you brought that up. What the hell's going on? It's like, here's how I take it. Alt media. You have the establishment of social media, your YouTubes, your Facebooks, your Twitters, that have really brought about citizen reporting, revolutionized it, given everybody a voice, the ability to have a platform. Then you have the monetization aspect of it, because you used to a lot of times had to go out and solicit sponsors, things like that. It was hard. It still is hard. It's very hard. But Google ads came around and people got addicted to that. And I hate to say addicted, because it was a great way, an easy way to be able to generate funding, to be able to fund and expand your operation. And now it seems like they're pulling the rug out from underneath everybody. Certainly seems to be planned, but certainly an attack on alt media. Wouldn't you?
I think it's planned at the highest levels. I've been saying that it's probably, we'll find out at some point in the future, that this was planned at Bilderberg like 2 years ago. It was definitely a coordinated attack, and it's definitely a straw man. This whole idea that corporations, advertisers are very concerned about having their precious advertisements and their brands associated with offensive content. That was the blanket statement, right? And their straw man was, trying to take down PewDiePie, trying to label him an anti-Semite, taking things he had said over hours and hours, dozens and hundreds of hours of content, taking it out of context and trying to paint the picture. The Wall Street Journal did this, that he was an anti-Semite. That's where this sort of began. And then in November 2016, Google CEO Sundar Pichai came out and famously said, there is no room at Google for fake news. So we're changing our algorithms to filter out fake news. We won't tolerate fake news, which begs the question, who decides what's fake news? And of course, this was all built on the Russians hacked the election, Putin's a bad guy straw man, which the DNC, which is now criminally complicit in the death of Seth Rich, I believe. All roads lead to the DNC, Hillary Clinton and Podesta, I think, probably.
Nothing to see here.
In terms of the murder, the political assassination of Seth Rich. By the way, did you happen to see the Megyn Kelly attempt at interviewing Putin? He absolutely slayed her and made her look like the fool she is. So none of this is working anymore. Oh, no, absolutely none of it is working with anybody with two brain cells rubbed together, Joe.
Right. No, absolutely. Speaking of Putin, I can't wait. I just can't wait to see the Oliver Stone interview. The hell with Megyn Kelly. I want to see what Oliver Stone has to say. Because if you've seen his documentary on, what is it, the Untold History of the United States, I think it is, he did a very, very in-depth review of the history of the United States. And if you buy the narrative, their whole Russia narrative and, the big bear's the enemy and everything else, he kind of dispels that in a very pro-Russia kind of way. However, I have to tell you, I find myself strangely drawn to Vladimir Putin. If for anything else, it's because of the fact that he's a manly man doing manly things, and you know where he stands. At least it seems to me that you know where he stands in relation to everything. It's almost like I wish our politicians were more like him. He just seems to be more real. I don't know what you.
Well, apparently he's got a 95% approval rating in Russia too. So the Russian people like him quite a bit. And I think what resonates with a lot of us who listen to him is his propensity to speak with common sense.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't mince words. He doesn't use a teleprompter, and he's very, very intelligent. So he doesn't. He's no shrinking violet from people like Megyn Kelly just because she has nice long legs and pretty blonde hair. He does not give a crap. That does not work on him. And he literally buried her in that interview. It's really amusing. This happened just a week or two ago, maybe about a week ago. So people want to Google that. It's the Megyn Kelly Putin. It was some round table with other leaders. I think Modi from India was stuck in the middle of them, which is also amusing to watch. But Putin literally, and the audience laughed and really, really roared and enjoyed every time Putin said anything, because he was always right over the target, dispensing truth bombs and just tearing Megyn Kelly apart, because all she was doing was trying to what am I trying to say? Perpetuate this, the State Department talking points and the DNC talking points that the Russians hacked the election. And he asks if she's read any of the documents then. And she said, well, the public ones, not the classified ones. And he says, well, then you've read nothing, because the public ones are phony baloney. It's like a tailor. Who tailored your suit?
Right.
I go to the tailor to figure out who wrote the report, because there's nothing in there that is even remotely factual that would suggest that the Russians did anything as it pertains to our election. But, you know, the DNC is as corrupt as the day is long. I mean, the Clinton body count, anybody who hasn't read that ought to just dig into the associated deaths of Clinton associates and friends over the years, going all the way back to the time when they were in Mena, Arkansas, or he was the governor of Arkansas, and all the CIA drugs were being run out of Mena. So these people have blood on their hands going back decades and decades and decades. So it's no surprise that the DNC would be caught with their pants down time and time and time again, lying, colluding, stealing the election from Bernie, stacking the election for Hillary, and then when she loses, they blame the Russians. It's just absolutely beyond the pale. And anybody who can think, anybody with critical thinking skills isn't buying any of it.
That's the other thing, too, is I can't believe how many people with critical thinking skills went to sleep when Trump got elected. I mean,
well, the alternative was her, though, the wicked witch of the North, West, East, and South. And so imagine if she would have gotten in. See, she has a license to kill. All of these years and decades, she's had a license to kill. And she thought she was going to be able to retain that license to kill and cover up her crimes. And she would have been able to do it had she gotten into the White House, because she could have stacked the DOJ and the FBI and kept all the people that are going to run cover for her in those positions. But she can't stack that deck now. And so she's really politically dead. Look what's happened to the Clinton Foundation. It's collapsed. All the donations have dried up. By the way, $12 billion roughly missing from the Haitian earthquake. All of that money went to the Clinton Foundation and vanished.
We don't want your blankets or your food. We just send your cash.
Yeah, just give us your billions. We'll take care of the rest, as long as there's no audits. So, no, she's politically dead, and she no longer has a license to kill. And by the way, those WikiLeaks Podesta emails, they give many of us pause, not only in the Seth Rich murder case, but as it relates to Scalia. I think Scalia was probably also a victim of political assassination. And if anybody wants to dig into that, just Google Podesta, Scalia, WikiLeaks, and just read a couple of those, because there were some very, very nefarious things being discussed, cloaked under the guise of a movie they wanted to produce. And it was millions of dollars that were going to exchange hands to produce this movie in and around the time of Scalia's death, leading up to the death. And then it was, I don't have it in front of me, so you guys got to go look it up for yourself. But these people, it's a mafia. They are a mafia. It is the deep state. At least the deep state, as it pertains to the DNC, has been laid bare for all to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you there. I was one of those guys. I did I take the George Carlin approach, which is, I can't support any of them because they're just all a bunch of clowns to me. And the more that I do this, the more I find myself disenchanted. with the political process because it's quite broken. And the Megyn Kelly thing too, you brought that up. And I think that's extremely relevant because to me, it shows that Operation Mockingbird never really stopped.
That's right.
If anything, it's in full effect. And then, of course, you've got all of these media personalities, whether it be print media or news media. It doesn't matter who it is. They're all members of the CFR.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're going to, parrot the talking points that they listen to and hear at these meetings and these CFR events. So it's all a manufactured reality. And I wonder why good people choose to just stick their head in the sand and go about their life when things, to me, seem to be at a very detrimental point or a very, very point of no return, if you ask me. I think that the system is already irreversibly broken, but we seem to just be able to kick that can down the road and it just keeps on sputtering along.
Well, you asked about gold earlier, and the criminals are still in charge as it relates to gold and silver and the price fixing, the LBMA with the silver and gold fix that's now electronic, and the COMEX, the manipulation with billions and billions of paper ounces of the metals, on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. So the criminals are still in charge, but their crimes are now being exposed. So we know about the silver rigging between HSBC and Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan. We know about the gold rigging. We know it exists. The problem is there's no justice. So nobody ever really goes to jail. They'll always pin it on some low-level trader, right? And they'll ban that guy from trading gold for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, the criminal bank has plenty of traders and plenty of systems in place to continue manipulating. So the problem is there's no justice. But you're right. I think as it pertains to the economy, and for instance, HSBC just came out, Joe, and said that in their estimation, the fair price for gold is $1,105. Okay, so this is one of the criminal banks that manipulates gold, and there's been trillions upon trillions upon trillions of paper dollars printed into existence by the Fed. That's all pouring into the stock market to prop up the stock market. By the way, Bill Gross is saying the market risk is highest since before the 2008 crisis, and I quote, he says, "Instead of buying low and selling high, you're buying high and crossing your fingers." So what's going on in the stock market is just one of the biggest bubbles we've ever seen. What's going on in the bond market is just one of the biggest bubbles we've ever seen. And Bill Holter says that's where the hyperinflation is going. The hyperinflation of the dollar is going into the bond market. It's going into the stock market. And at some point, that hyperinflation of the dollar is going to hit our real world merchandise and food and gas, the things that we need to buy to survive. It's going to be at that point people are going to want gold. Whether HSBC says it's worth $1,100 or $11,000, at that point you're going to want some physical gold and some physical silver, and dare I say maybe a few cryptocurrencies. We can talk about that too if you'd like.
Well, yeah, there's thousands of them. I mean, they're popping up all over the place, these cryptocurrencies now.
Yeah, I think there's, by some estimates, I think I say that because I don't know the exact number. Right. I just heard the other day, I think there's around 684 of them. So say 650. All these cryptos, most of these are going to be, not successful.
Right.
But some of them, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like Litecoin, and and a handful of others are already doing very well, and some of them are here to stay. The blockchain is here to stay in some capacity, and so there's many corporations now, dozens of corporations that are interested in the Ethereum blockchain, and so we've seen Ethereum go from $7 to $260 in just the past few months.
Wow.
Now, in my opinion, that's what should be happening with silver. But of course, it's endlessly manipulated lower with paper silver. So we haven't seen that yet.
Cryptos, that's the thing, is that it is very hard to manipulate those cryptos.
Yeah, well, that's right. Now, people will say it's not hard to manipulate because the banks can go in and buy up. The Bitcoin market cap, I think right now is only, let's say it's 50 billion, 60 billion. I know between Ethereum and Bitcoin together, it's around 100 billion just for those two. But that's pocket change to bankers. So the idea is that they could go in, buy them all up and start to tank these things. That's one argument. But you're right. They can't go into the COMEX and print into existence all of these contracts for Bitcoin or Ethereum and sell those contracts into the market, causing the price to plunge. And that's what they do with silver. And I'll just share this with you guys. If you haven't heard, I just interviewed Cliff Hyde. Now, this is going to have music under it, but it's copyright free. So let me play this for you. But this is just a snippet from Cliff High talking about the cryptos because I asked him point blank, I said, do you think it's possible, as some people I've interviewed have charged, that these cryptos are an invention of the bankers and the intelligence agencies to brainwash humanity into accepting digital currency because that's where we know they want to take us? And then I also said, before he answered, I said, keeping in mind that maybe that's what happened with Bitcoin, but now with many of these others, I think these are the result of the free market responding to the success of Bitcoin. So they're not all intelligence operations, are they? And here's what he said.
The powers that be are sort of freaking out because they're losing. They didn't anticipate the springing of cryptos. It was universe providing us the opportunity to express ourselves outside of the slave system that has been imposed on us, and it's got them all freaked out because they can't close these doors once universe makes them.
So,
Right.
And I find it fascinating because, he's a smart guy. And, remember in 2012, we all talked about this Great Awakening?
Sure.
See this shift in consciousness. I don't know, man. Do you think between 2012 and now, would you estimate that more people have woken up or fewer people have woken up than the previous 5 years from 2007 to 2012? I think a heck of a lot of people have woken up.
I think so too. I think the whole, I think that the Trump campaign had a lot to do with that. Again, I think people buy too much into the cult of personality. But I can say that from the standpoint of, I think we hit that point where people saw what happened to Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012, and they saw an opportunity to be able to push out whoever it was, the establishment candidates on either side, because really, truly, Sanders had the momentum, and he should have been able to, he should have overcome Clinton. He should have slayed Clinton, but he was they say he was sabotaged. Sanders, of course, made over $1 million last year. A lot of that probably came from the DNC. So, I think that was really pivotal because people had a hope again, that things would change for the better. The thing I will say about Trump, Johnny King and I just talked about this on the air, is I think his inconsistency. Either it's senility or it's genius, because no one can peg this guy for anything because he changes his stance on things regularly. So you never know where he stands on anything. Consequently, people can't label him as anything, as, you're a this, you're a that, because you consistently do this behavior all over the board. So from a tactical standpoint, I think it's genius because you can never peg him for one thing or another because you never know what he's going to say or do,
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I want to say as it pertains to me slamming the DNC earlier, I'm more than happy to slam the RNC because we saw what they did to Ron Paul in 2012. You're absolutely right. They did the exact same thing to Ron Paul that the DNC did to Bernie. And I'm no Bernie fan, believe me, although I think he probably is a better human being than Hillary Clinton. We can
sure
that, but I don't think he's got a body count quite as long as she does, her husband. But Trump, I got to give him credit where credit's due. He just said no to this Paris Accord, which is the first step in the slippery slope to fulfilling these UN Agenda 2030 policies, which are going to turn us all into serfs, because what they want to do in the name of saving the planet, Joe, as you well know, is limit, or I should say extinguish, the availability of gasoline, coal, natural gas, any of these fossil fuels, quote unquote fossil fuels. They got to do away with those in the effort to reduce carbon emissions to zero and save the planet. Now, for folks who don't understand what that means, if they do not give us new forms of energy, clean energy, exotic forms of energy that currently do not exist or maybe exist, but the deep state won't tell us about them, if they don't release those technologies, we will live as 17th century serfs by 2050. And it's not going to be looking too good by 2030. So for him to take us out of the Paris Accord is a pretty big deal, because that was a $100 billion a year Ponzi scheme.
Right.
And they wanted it to be funded by we the people in the West to try to lift up the third world. But that's not their plan. What they want to do is drag the first world down to third world standards. And by the way, in the meantime, during the next 10 years, allow India and China to build all the damn coal plants and all of the dirty plants that they want. But we have to reduce ours.
Right.
So, and you'll notice who all stood up and who all came out against Trump when he took us out of the Paris Accord. At the head of the list was
Yeah.
Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs.
Oh, the
That should
big
tell you
guys.
everything you need to know.
Exactly, man. Well, we're out of time, and I'd love to have you back again, Sean, because I tell you what, the Sheeple audience, I know they really appreciate you. I certainly do.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys too, and thanks a lot for keeping an eye on the clock. You know, I have Harley Schlanger here at the bottom of the hour. Otherwise, I'd love to talk longer. But I really appreciate the work you guys do, and my best to everybody at Daily Sheeple.
Thank you, brother. And folks, we'll have many more interviews like this in the days and weeks ahead as I got to get the subject matter experts in to let you guys know the truth because you're just not getting it from the real fake news, the mainstream media. I'm Joe Joseph. This was thedailysheeple.com. Feel free to comment below and visit our website at thedailysheeple.com. Have a great day, everybody.